everyone, it's Monday and you're watching Techstrong, gang. It's going to be an AI Monday. We've got robots and everything else. We've got a great panel. We've got one of our special gang members joining us. Stay tuned for Techstrong, gang. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Monday, Techstrong, gang. It's an AI Monday. We've got a lot of good stuff to go over. There's just so much going on in AI. There's always good stuff. This is like the gift that keeps on giving from a media point of view. We're going to be joined by a great gang cast today. Let me lead it off, as usual, from out in Colorado. The man in the library, our CTO and principal analyst, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitch, welcome.
Hey, happy Monday. Great to have everybody here.
Absolutely. Good to see you, man. Hope you had a great weekend. Joining us from the city of, is it still the city of brotherly love? I don't know.
That's what we like to think. That's what we like to think.
Yeah. Okay, you're still selling that.
Despite media reports to the contrary. Absolutely.
Okay. Joining us from Philadelphia, she's our managing editor for DevOps.com and Security Boulevard and more, our own Sharon Florentine.
Hello. Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you on. And joining us is one of our roving gang members. That sounds almost illegal. He's out in the West Coast today, the one and the only Bachagaloop, John Willis. John, welcome.
Hey, good. Hey, about the city of brotherly love, I heard a term I hadn't heard in years, the Broad Street Bullies.
Oh,
that came up
Dave Schultz and the Philadelphia Flyers.
Oh,
Gary Clark.
That in a long time.
What a smile Gary Clark had.
We're coming back. It's our year. It's your
year. And then, last but not least, my sidekick here in our Boca Raton headquarters at Techstrong, our Chief Content Officer hailing from the Bronx, New York, Mike Vizard.
Not in the Bronx today, but happy to be here.
Hey, Mike, it's as I said, it's an AI day kind of day today. Every day's an AI kind of day, but...
Well, if you count robots as AI, it's in
there too.
All right, well, let's just jump right in, and I'm going to go right to John immediately, but we saw this week or past week, Microsoft AI engineers sent a complaint to the FTC saying that, heavens to Betsy, the AI engine was creating disturbing images. And there's two aspects of this. He's charging that the safety protocols are not being observed, but we'll talk about copyrights and all kinds of fun things that go with that in the second part of that conversation. And this comes on the heels of Google also stumbling with their Gemini launch. So, John, you've been watching this space for a while. What's going on here? Are these models going crazy or what?
Yeah, there's a genie in the bottle problem, right? And the thing that all these, we take all the good, right? The good is that they've trained enormous corpuses of data to get us all these incredible results, right? Almost all of the internet, images, image recognitions, all this stuff. But there's a bias in the system. And so, and that is the sort of problem space that everybody from an organization that's taking their own corpus of data, or your sort of Microsoft or your Google, you have to constantly monitor this bias. And so I was looking at, I was reading the article at Microsoft and the employee who was, exposing, what's going on here with some of the image generations and copyright issues. And I looked at Microsoft's Responsible AI Standard V2, and it's like if you read it, it's either just blah 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 blah, or it's so complicated. And I was reading a book by this woman called Joy Boulumwini, and she's written a book called Unmasking AI, and she focused on racial and gender bias, and that's not exactly what's going on at Microsoft. But the point she makes is somehow, in this muck of all this stuff and all this generation that's very probabilistic and non-deterministic, right? There's no problem. How do we stop? If we tell a large language model or a large image processing system to go read every image on the internet, oh, and now, by the way, since you're doing that with some mathematical magic, don't print Disney pictures, right? And her point was you have to have meaningful transparency. And I thought about that, right? Like if I read Microsoft's, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert, but like it doesn't seem meaningful to me. It's like 7 pages of blah 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 blah. We're going to do this blah blah blah, and I don't know what. I don't get paid the gazillions of dollars that the people who are marketing marks at Microsoft, but I think they have to answer Joy Blumi's question is, how do you provide meaningful transparency? And that's the hard problem. And the second part is, this kind of continuous oversight. So they could argue that they have a standard for responsible AI. It's in the documentation, and therefore we've done our part. But what I think they're not doing with Joy Blumuni, and I always have problems pronouncing her last name, is continuous oversight. And this is what I'm doing with a lot of my clients right now, or I'm helping them build their own corpus of data. And we talked about this last time in vector databases. You have to have an end-to-end process that's constantly monitoring the toxicity, the bias, all those things. And if you're not doing that, you're not being responsible. And by reading that article, Mike, it sounds like they don't have a process for that second part.
But I got a problem here, though.
Uh-oh.
This whistleblower from Microsoft, the last time I checked, they owned a sizable chunk of OpenAI, which is the people behind this image processor. Did he have to go outside the family and tell them what he was thinking? Right? Yeah. Why couldn't he just say, hey, we got a problem here, guys?
Well, he did apparently, because if you read it, it said that he talked to Microsoft and those guys, and I guess apparently he didn't like the response, so he sent a separate letter to the FTC.
Well, he should find another job.
Yeah, well, that's probably going to happen at this point.
No, but Alan, I do think I think the point is, how do you solve that transparency problem, or how do you solve the bias of these engines that people don't even know? They can't. The people who wrote these things can't even explain how they work now. Mm-hmm. But you have to at least show some evidence of continuous oversight. And I think if you read his article, it's clear that there's nothing in place to at least try to say.
I just think going to the FTC, this guy pulled the fire alarm in school. I would. I can't imagine if he brought this up to the powers that be that, John, if it's so obvious to you, why isn't it obvious to them?
Life is full of examples where CEOs didn't pay attention to what employees were telling them. So who knows what the deal is. But John, to your point, let me just add one little thing here. I think you're kind of saying that the licensing terminology used around these services is kind of so dense as to almost be meaningless. I mean,
gobbledygook.
Yeah.
No, it's not licensed. And here's the thing, right? I think Microsoft has been, anybody you talk to about, enterprise use of responsible AI, they'll point you towards Azure OpenAI. Because they've done a much better job of at least saying we're going to do certain things because we know a lot of our customers are going to be enterprise customers, that even OpenAI themselves don't do, right? So this is really more not really a legally binding. It's we have put out a standard for responsible AI at Microsoft. But I'm saying it is when you read it, you start getting a gaze after about the second or third page. And it's just hard to say, what Joy Blumey is saying is, I just want transparent AI. And so if I'm Microsoft and I'm billions of dollars and I'm doing this, maybe I should sit down at the top and figure out, what does that mean? And how can I tell it in such a succinct way? Not that you can solve the problem, because it's almost an impossible problem to solve.
So two things.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I can just interject here real quick. I think there's two issues that I feel like underpin this whole thing. And the first is, if they're building this corpus of data, right? But where is that internal stuff, or that's just external garbage? It's the garbage in, garbage out problem. You put everything you can find into an AI model, and if 75% of it is garbage and that's what it's learning from, what else is it going to spit out? If you're just sucking in great amounts of image data from the internet, which we all know is flooded with it, of course it's going to put out these horrible, biased, toxic images. So I agree that there has to be some kind of oversight on what it's pulling in. And yes, there should be some kind of way to flag that and say, we don't want X, Y, Z, P, and Q to even come in the first place for the engine to churn through. I don't know how you do that. That's not my area.
You know,
And that
Sharon,
data is-
what puzzles me is it seems like we're not talking about the metadata around these photos that it's ingesting. So, you know, in prompt engineering, it's all about the context that you're adding, right? And I don't know that people are giving great context in these image generations, but many of the photos on the internet at least have some tags on them, some keywords, some information about them. And it was just kind of, we're opening it up, and I'm not proposing anything like radical, like a rating system or something like that. But, you know, you even, you know, if you look at a violent game, it'll give you a warning. Do you want to look at this before you go to the next thing in Steam? Or if you're going to go to this page, it says this kind of content on it. It seems like add in some machine learning and some metadata with the Gen AI, and, you know, now you can start to recognize what things are and how to categorize it in terms of what's acceptable to use to your transparency point.
But Mitch, here's the problem, right? The problem is at this point, all that data is unsupervised, right? So we've crossed that chasm from sort of labeled data. Early on, all the images and, you know, sort of ImageNet and all that were being built labeled. But then the breakthrough was this unsupervised deep learning. And one of the problems is, you know, like the idea that you can say, create me a picture that has a stream, it has 3 green trees with purple mountains and all that, and it just takes all these images and generates it. It's non-deterministic, it's probabilistic, right? And that's a lot of overhead in that, right? You know, to do that. And now, one of the answers I'm guessing could be, could I then add a back process to say what's in that image? And that technology exists because it goes both ways. But then the cost, like if I'm using DALL-E and I say, you know, generate me a Disney character, there's nothing that's labeled or meta about that. I mean, I guess if you say Disney in the prompt, yes, but like an image that's going to sort of turn out to be, you know, offensive or something like that, you'd have to reverse engineer that through the probabilistic model to say, oh, I think this picture is a copyright infringement. And I don't know that anybody wants to incur the costs.
There's a second part of this thing that we got to get to, though. So he's also alleging that Microsoft is ignoring all the copyrights on various content, and there's this debate as to whether or not there's fair use of this stuff or whether you're supposed to recognize these copyrights.
I'm shocked.
As an owner of copyrighted material, how do you feel about this?
Look, you know what? Listening to you guys talk, this is what comes in my mind. You want to live on the bleeding edge? Sometimes it's bleeding. Right, hence the name, bleeding edge.
Be painful.
And these are the kinds of things. Normally, a lot of this stuff takes place behind closed doors and black curtains and smoke-filled rooms and you know, private hearings and labs. But we're seeing this play out across our computer screens in real time. And yes, there's absolutely a copyright image. As the owner or CEO here of Techstrong, do I want my information and images being used to help other people generate content without being compensated? No, I don't want that. I'm waiting for the Times to call me to make a deal so that we could license our data. No one's called.
You mean OpenAI or Microsoft? New York Times doesn't care.
Oh, I want to be, no, I meant the Times got their stuff licensed. Why didn't we, God darn it? But
they just called. I've got him on the phone.
You got him on the phone? No, I was going to hang up a phone number. Call me, please. But
call Alan Schimmel. Thanks.
But seriously, you know, this is going to be a growing pain problem that I think 2 years from now we'll look back and say, "Isn't that quaint?" Bless their heart. It's going to get solved. It's you know, this is the.
I mean, I think it's the Sarah Silverman lawsuit, and I don't know the gory details, but you know, her lawsuit was there are comedians now asking ChatGPT to create jokes based on her. You know, so the whole thing, I can set the persona. Hey, I'm Sarah Silverman, write me some jokes. And I thought her lawsuit was reasonably legitimate in that, it's one thing to say, ChatGPT, create me jokes, and it takes jokes from, all the different comedians and creates an amalgamation that gives you, that's going to be a hard problem, right? Just like an image that gets creating a Disney character. But if I go into the prompt and I say, create me a Disney character that's, smoking marijuana, and, then there should be some transparency and oversight in whoever's controlling the prompt context windows to at least say, and the same thing with Sarah Silverman, right? If I say, I go create me jokes based on the persona of Sarah Silverman, then I go out to a nightclub and I start telling those jokes. I don't know how, OpenAI.
Let me give you a legal, John, for this, right? So the analog to this in the analog world was the case of Bela Lugosi versus, I forget who he was, it's his family, he was dead already. And that people were using the likeness of Bela Lugosi to connotate vampires and Dracula. And this went all the way up. This is a big case in law school where do you have the right to your likeness? And today we think of it of course he does, or they do. Back then it wasn't so black and white. It was a black and white picture actually, but it wasn't so cut and dry. And the courts put in this whole right to privacy and the right to your likeness as part of your being. I think we're going to see the same thing in the Sarah Silverman case, right? Where you have a right to your style, to your essence, if you will. Your digital essence, persona. Your persona. And but again, we're on the bleeding edge. These things, it's going to take a few years for it to play out. But we look, guys, we probably spent more time. We didn't get a chance to talk about Google stumbling out of the block again.
Well, we mentioned that at the top of the thing, saying they too are part of the example. I would just say about all this stuff, you got Microsoft, Google saying they're going to indemnify anybody from a lawsuit, and that's awesome, great. But just remember, if they lose, that all these images are going to have to get ripped and replaced, and all that code that you're generating too might have to get ripped and replaced because it too belongs to somebody else. So it's going to be a problem.
I say full speed ahead, damn the torpedoes. We're taking a break. We'll be back with Techstrong Gang.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
All right, folks, we're back to our next section here, and we're talking about a survey that, now full disclosure, was actually put out by a PR firm named Edelman. And they're also an advertising agency, but they asked a bunch of consumers whether or not they still trust AI as much as they did. And the numbers seem to have dropped from the first time that Edelman put out this survey. It's not a catastrophic drop. It's like from 54% down to like 44, 47, somewhere in that neighborhood. But the point here is the more we seem to get exposed to these AI models, the more we start to see some of these issues we were just talking about. So Mitch, let's start with you. What's your level of trust in these AI models these days?
Well, we were talking about in the prior segment, John was talking about the non-deterministic nature of some of this, whether it's unsupervised learning or it's large language models, et cetera. I think we're one of the reasons for the drop in trust, and there's a good article that mentions this, is our own privacy. And we were talking about the persona before about that. It's just our information. You don't have to be a comedian to be worried about my stuff getting out on the internet. Now my stuff showing up in someone's, prompt from a Gen AI, a prompt that it's sent in. So I think, overall, people are we're a little too close to the edge of the AI doomsday kind of scenario and a little close to some sci-fi so people can relate to it. I'm not saying it's happening, but you don't have to draw a very long line to get from where we are to what could happen. So I think it just worries people now where it didn't worry us before to the same extent.
I don't know. Sharon, what do you think? Because I've known you for well over 2 decades, and I know you don't trust anybody.
You're right about that. You are certainly right about that. No, I also don't There's degrees, I think. And for me, it's more about the hallucinations that keep happening. I get so many submissions for the magazines daily, and I can absolutely tell when someone has sent me a chat GPT generated article that they want to go on DevOps or Cloud Native Now, and they're trying really hard to pretend that they're an expert. And half of the sentences don't make sense grammatically, nor do they make sense technologically. And I think, to extrapolate a little bit, people are starting to realize that ChatGPT can spit out nonsense that sounds real good, but maybe they submit that as a paper or they present that at work and everybody looks at them and goes, "Oh my God, you are full of crap." That doesn't mean anything. So I don't know how much that's impacting people's trust. It certainly makes me take a couple steps back and go, all right, maybe I'll use the tool to help me develop something, but I'm not going to trust it 100% when, my job is on the line, my credibility is on the line, that kind of thing.
Hey, John, I was at this AI meetup last week, and one of the things they were talking about is the longer the article gets, the harder it is for the AI engine to maintain consistency because it seems to forget the front part of the article. So are we starting to see an issue here with how much depth can the AI engine really get to and maintain some level of constant truth?
Well, that's a cat and mouse game, because I think as these context windows get so much bigger, we're going to see that less and less. I think that comes from that. It's like, I think they call it small to big. This problem is that when people are trying to build their own corpus data, they have to be aware that you have to put some of your sort of really important knowledge in the middle of a thing, so that doesn't happen. But these context windows are getting so massively big. I think it goes back to the sort of the theme maybe of this day is maybe it's not AI Monday, it's AI non-deterministic Monday, which is there's 2 points I want to make. One, there is sensationalism, like the Air Canada thing is a classic. When we talk about trust, right? That hasn't helped the case for AI, right? But the funny thing about it is it's a $6 billion market cap that had to pay $1,200, right? And there's a really high probability that they weren't even using GPT because it was like 2 or 3 years ago. But all the sensation is, look, AI's, look at this, the world is ending. Like, all right, stop, take a breather. It was $1,200. I mean, it was terrible PR. So there is this, the Gemini problem, and we're just going to see this sensationalist, and that's going to sort of erode people's confidence. But at the end of the day, the real problem is, and Damon Edwards, another friend of Techstrong, says this very well, that in data science and in data processing and computer processing, all the things that we've all been involved with for 20, 30, whatever years, we've always been trying to drive a deterministic way. We write programs to give us deterministic output. We manage flow of software delivery in determinism. We now live in a world that is foreign to almost everybody, unless you've been studying AI for 20 or 30 years, which is all non-deterministic and probabilistic. And so like a hallucination is really just the model telling you what it thinks is the best answer. So it's not really a hallucination.
It's not doing it on purpose.
That's right. It is what it was designed to tell you. And so a lot of my time now, like Sharon and I do, and what, if you're a corporation and you want to use an LLM model and a friend of mine is building a system for California Edison, right? And it's an LLM that's a multi-language that the guys and women that climb up on the power lines and have to change those like incredibly dangerous things, you can't just use ChatGPT to answer questions. So they have to have like 95%, 98% accuracy. And to do that, you have to do a process of data engineering to get your data And it's a whole, it's what my workshops, you ask my workshops, that's my workshops are about. How do you?
I want to weigh in on this, though.
I'll go after you.
Okay, you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Good.
So I think that I determined, how's that, in my own natural intelligence, that two things are afoot here. The more general purpose that model is, the less I'm going to trust it. So I think what we really want to see is a lot more narrowly focused LLMs that are optimized for specific tasks and the data's been vetted, and then we'll stitch together all these LLMs into something that feels like a workflow and we'll get the result we want. But I'm not sure that these big open AI platforms, lovely exercise in computer science and it's taught us a lot, but I don't think that's the end game.
So I'm going to take a different view than all of you. And here's my thing. What you're all talking about is human bias. We live in a society where our politicians lie through their teeth every time they open their mouth. We live in a society where as much as we're talking about trust in AI, it's still 4 times how much we trust our Congress. Okay? Humanity lies. Humanity created AI. Humanity has biases. Humanity created AI. Why are we holding AI up to this, I think, artificial thing of, oh my God, it said something that's not true? Look to the parents to see the child's behavior. We live in a world of lying and bias and hallucinations and everything else.
Alan, to your point, so I remember when a Copilot came out, right? And it was one of the large banks who have like 15,000 Java developers, right? And one person was telling me, "Oh my God, that it just doesn't write great code," and he was all complaining about how the code might not be amazing and great. And I said, "Out of those 15,000 Java developers you have, how many of those, can we do a bell chart? How many of those are great coders?" And the answer was not a whole lot. Well, then, to your point, humans lie. Coders don't create. Not all coders create amazing code. So when we start criticizing Copilot for creating mediocre code, that's the medium.
Yeah. But come back to me in 3 years because this thing gets better every day.
That's right. It's exactly right. That's right.
Right.
Now, I'm going to defend AI. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sharon.
I was just going to say that was kind of what I was trying to get at in the last segment, was that until we fix these problems in the human element and can eliminate, all bias and poor performance and low intelligence and all of that stuff, then we are never going to be able to achieve that with AI, because that's where the information is originally coming from. So, okay, sorry, Mitch, go ahead.
No, I would back you up on that, because this is not an AI problem. It's a human problem.
Yep.
Sharon will tell you, the longer my articles are, the harder time I have putting together a cohesive, understandable conclusion.
Well, that has more to do with your advanced state. But
I bet I'm not the only one on the planet that has that issue.
No,
and
absolutely
those articles are fed into this model.
One last word on this. So I was a poli-sci major in college, right? And one of my chief poli-sci professors, he was a socialist in the 30s, right? But went the other way, became an arch conservative. And he used to hammer this home to us at St. John's University. He used to say, communism is a great model if you have a society of atheistic saints, right? But humanity is not made up of atheistic saints.
All right, last word on the subject. I would just remind you, great movie. Are you mad as hell and not going to take it anymore, no matter who is lying?
Shout it out the window. Shout it out the window. I love ending with a movie quote. Let's take a break here on The Gang. We're going to be back in a minute. We've got some robots.
All right, we're back, and as promised, we're going to talk about robots. Folks at Toyota have been showing their latest advances in a thing called a Punyo project, which is going to bring robots into our houses one day, and they're going to be companions and play chess with us and do the laundry and do all kinds of things. And the Chinese...
I don't know what all kinds of things are, Mike. Let's not get explicit.
It's up to the individual, man. It's privacy, man. Privacy.
That's privacy.
And at the same time, the Chinese are talking about mass consumerization of these robots. They're talking about building millions of these things. So it looks like maybe in our lifetime, we're going to have robot companions. So, John, I know you're a big fan of Toyota over the years, and you've been watching those guys. So what's your take on robots? And, is this the ultimate expression of AI?
Yeah, no, I think it's funny. Just this week, there was I read that article, and I like TRI. I'm like, okay, I think you knew you got me on that one, because I'm a big Toyota, like the history of Toyota. Mm-hmm. But this week, I'm up. Gene Kim has his forum where we write papers, and one of the guys who came up here had a lot of experience on robotics. And one of the things he's saying that we're seeing a convergence now, and I didn't know this, and I did a little research, but Amazon has this Astro, and then Google's trying to create this. And what they're doing is, one of the approaches, it sounded like in the TRI, they were dealing with the sensitivity and sensors, and how does a robot not, kill a child by, sort of trying to lift it up, right? Because it doesn't know the strength. So that's one angle. But what I'm seeing, and I heard this week, was using the sort of LLM agent competition models to behave more like, a human for decisions. So you start reading about where Amazon wants to go with this Astro to be a guard dog, a pet, and so what you wind up having then is using a lot of the large language model to actually sort of like multi-agent stuff, where we're finding more we take agents and sort of pit them against each other, the more knowledge we get. And you mentioned this, Mike, in the last second, sort of maybe at the end of the day, it's more about specific models working in concert. So that there's a lot of that going on. And there's one other thing that was interesting. The guy from the military. The military is basically coming up with these massive clusters of drones that are for battle, and they're really right now. The problem they have is that you've all seen at football games now, where college will show these amazing pictures of drones in the air, and they're making images. But there's no collaborative communication between those. They're all just, each drone is supposed to be in its own position, and they don't really know about the other drones. What they're trying to do is try to send drones in that literally a throwaway. I mean, they're going to be the front edge or the end point or the edge of battle. But they're trying to create, and the reason why they're publicly disclosing all this is all the logic in robotics right now, or drones, is proprietary. There's some interesting stuff that's communication between, if I had 30 drones, how can I get them to work together? But all that's proprietary. So the government decided that we're going to open this up, that this is what we're looking for, so people could create more open source paths for robotic communication. And I thought that was really interesting.
I thought there was a movie about this already in Star Wars, wasn't there? The Clone Wars?
Oh, there was.
I think it's called the Borg Collective.
The Borg? Okay. I mean, this is sci-fi living out in real world right here.
Yes. Sharon, let me get your thoughts here on this, because what John is alluding to is on page 42 of the license agreement, it says the robot might kill your child. So I knew you kind of.
Listen, in Philadelphia, the legend of Hitchbot reigns supreme, and I don't know if Yuns, as we say around here, have heard about this, but a couple years ago, a college, I believe it was a college robotics team or group, created an autonomous robot. They called it Hitchbot, and they trained it to literally hitchhike. And the point was, they set it loose and they trained it to roll along the side of the highway, and it would stick its thumb out. People would pick it up and take it on a leg of their journey, and then they would set it down, and it would move along. And let me tell you, that little guy made it through the Pacific Northwest, I believe, through Canada, came down the Northeast corridor until it got to Philadelphia, where a group of folks beat the living crap out of it and drowned it in a puddle.
That's hilarious. Oh, that's a
City of
great
brotherly
story.
love.
And
We've come
that's
full
where
circle.
its journey ended.
Hey,
So I don't know.
it's a robot. It's not a brother.
That's true. That's true.
That's the Broad Street Bullies for you.
Well,
I'll tell
That's
you
the Broad
anytime.
Street Bullies.
So I think what John was saying about, these things are gonna usually end up kind of being like one-time use deal. Like, yeah, maybe they don't necessarily need to then network together and be able to share information if they're just flying out there to distract or do,
But we're
first strike
seeing
kind
this.
of things.
We're
I
seeing
don't
this
know.
in Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
The kamikaze drones that the Russians buy from Iran, right? They're
But-
one-time users. They're
The reason they needed collaboration, right? Because they are just one time. They're going to go to the front of battle. They expect to lose all of them. But one of the things that is like guidance. So what if the place they're going changes? That's the problem. Right now, if you think about the college thing where the engineering students show their logo with colored drones, none of them know about each other. The problem that the government is seeing is like, okay, the mission is to go here, but it's changed. And like that's a really hard problem if the actual drones can't
But by
communicate.
open sourcing that, are we opening that technology up to nefarious groups and nation states that we don't want to have that?
But again, like the Chinese, he didn't go too deep into the classified stuff, but I didn't go into any classified stuff. But the point being, it's happening. So you either sort of open it and get at least a posture where you're protected. Because our adversaries are already doing this stuff.
And
I
that's an
remember,
issue
John,
with
back
open
in-
source, regardless of its use, right? So, okay. Sorry, Mitch, go ahead. I
No,
keep
no,
interrupting you. My bad.
No.
No, what came to mind as we're talking about this is I think it was like 2015 or 16, the whole idea of swarm intelligence, right? Looking at nature and how, birds fly in these crazy, or fish, flying these, swim in these crazy patterns. It almost sounds like that's kind of the there is some logic about where we're going and how they all get there. They talk to each other and form some kind of pattern to do that. Seems like a replication of that. The other thought I have is, I don't know. I'm very skeptical of, are we close to, I won't even let Tesla drive my car autonomously. Am I going to turn a robot loose in my house and come home and find, what? It just, we're not there yet. There's so many challenges, I think, to be solved. Maybe it's a year down the road. Maybe it's 20.
Well,
I don't know what it is, but I don't
Let's
think
go back to
we're
the
there
bias
yet.
thing, if I can, real quick. Like the Joy Blooming, if you read her book, Unmasking AI, one of the things was she was a dark-skinned African in MIT, and she found that when she was doing image recognition, it didn't recognize her. And so she basically wrote a whole book about like how early image recognition systems didn't recognize Michelle Obama. But here's where it gets really scary, especially in drones, but even cars. There's already studies now that autonomous vehicle might opt in a decision where it only has two choices to go towards white people versus black people.
Kobayashi Maru.
Well, because the corpus of data is like, she even said the
50
NIST
people don't
database.
know what that is.
I know.
If they don't, then they don't get the joke, right?
Yeah,
The NIST,
had to be there.
The NIST database, which is the standard for facial recognition or biometric information, is like, she said, 80% white, 75% male. So we have a bias built into, and so you go back to drones. Her point is a drone that has autonomy and weapons, like, who knows how the decision it's going to make? And then there's gender bias. Same things. 80% of all the images in this database is male, 75% are white. And so that is the data that's driving this probabilistic So I thought that was fascinating. I would highly recommend her book.
So guys,
Unmasking it.
I got to jump in though. I think part of the problem is, part of it, I'll be really honest, it's age bias, guys. We've got, except for Sharon here, the rest of us are of an age where this is brand spanking new, radical, my God, it's changing. Think about someone born in the 1800s and seeing planes flying, right? What are they going to think? I think for our children and for the young people coming up here who are going to be AI natives, there's going to be robotic natives, it's going to be a lot more normal to them and normalized, and they'll sand off a lot of these rough edges. And I wanted to bring up something. I'm holding a book. Next week, Mitchell, Mike, and I are not next week, the week after. Actually, next week. We are in Paris for KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. And there's a young lady named Cassandra Chin. She's the daughter of a good friend of mine, Stephen Chin from JFrog. She does the children's, she usually brings Raspberry Pis, and they do children coding at KubeCon. She just wrote this book called Fippy's AI Friend. Fippy is one of the KubeCon stuffed toys that you'll see at KubeCon. And Fippy's AI Friend here is a robot guided by AI. And unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of the skills that the real animals do. But Fippy found his secret power in AI. And there's a workshop that's a companion to this book. These are the kinds of things that our kids are going to be using and growing up with. By the time they're old enough, these bias about letting the car drive or having a robot in the house or whether AI is using copyright images, they're going to be way in the rearview mirror. It's just going to be life to them.
I think, too, a good example of that, Alan, is we often reference something like Kobayashi Maru or sci-fi this and in our kind of history of our lives, things that have influenced us. Generations of younger folks, kids, whatever, they're watching AI Companion on Hulu. They're seeing a whole new genre of which it's interesting to us, but that's the new thing. That's what they're building their corpus of what's possible. At least that's one of the influences on it. So I think it's a total change in perspective.
I want to get one last thing in, so in some ways, the Kobayashi Maru, so the original test for what you call the Kobayashi Maru, what I described as that sort of when an autonomous vehicle has to make a decision, that's about an 80-year-old test called the trolley car. And
that's
it's a famous, so I don't know. I mean, I hope you're right, Alan. I think, I told you guys I'm writing a book about AI, and, I don't worry about the world. I don't worry about Terminator, and I don't worry about all that stuff. This is the new technology that's just going to change the way we live and behave, and hopefully for the better. I do worry about the bias in the models. I'm just wondering if that might be too big of a problem to solve.
My last comment on all this, get your AI robot off my lawn.
Don't play on your own AI.
No, it's get the hell off my lawn.
On the issue of bias, we'll end it up here on bias because I want to make just a quick statement. We recorded this on International Women's Day, and this is International Women's Month. And we're excited to have women like Sharon and Amanda Razzini and Trace Bannon and Tracy Reagan and some of the other people here on the gang. We've come a long way, but we still got a long way to go, right? We've come a long way, baby, but we've still got a long way to go. And I just feel like we should acknowledge that. We are in KubeCon, and we will be actually, I'm interviewing Cassandra and Stephen as well as everyone else there. If you're watching this and you're in KubeCon, come by and say hello to us. We'll be right on the show floor, Techstrong TV Live. John, enjoy West Coast. Thanks for being on the gang with us today. Mitchell, Sharon, of course, Mike, thank you. You've just watched Techstrong Gang.